The afternoon light slanted through the kitchen window, catching dust motes that drifted lazy and slow above the counter. Claire stood barefoot on the cool tile floor, one hand resting on the worn butcher block island, the other holding her cell phone like it might bite her. Her daughter's text glowed on the screen. "Can we talk? Coming over in 20." Claire set the phone down and pulled open the cupboard where she kept the coffee, the familiar ritual steadying her hands. The scoop clinked against the metal can. Water rushed into the carafe. She'd been waiting for this conversation for 3 months now, ever since Emily had announced she was moving to Portland with her girlfriend. 3 months of careful words and swallowed questions, of pretending everything was fine when her chest felt tight with all the things she couldn't figure out how to say. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed. Claire leaned against the counter, her gaze drifting to the old wooden recipe box tucked between the toaster and the fruit bowl. Her mother's recipe box, really. Pale blue paint worn smooth at the edges from decades of handling, the brass hinges tarnished but still strong. Claire hadn't opened it in years, not since her mother passed. It just sat there, a quiet presence among the everyday clutter of life. She heard Emily's car in the driveway, the engine cutting off, the slam of the door. Claire's stomach tightened. She poured 2 mugs of coffee, even though her hands wanted to shake. The back door opened without knocking. Emily had always done that, walked right in like she still lived here, and Claire loved it, even as it reminded her how soon that easy familiarity would exist only over video calls and holiday visits. "Hey, Mom." Emily dropped her canvas bag on the kitchen chair, the same chair she'd sat in for homework and breakfast and late-night talks since she was 6 years old. She looked tired, her hair pulled back in a messy knot, her eyes uncertain in a way that made Claire's heart squeeze. "Coffee's ready." Claire turned to grab the mugs, grateful for something to do with her hands. They sat at the table, the old oak surface scarred and stained from 1,000 meals. Emily wrapped both hands around her mug but didn't drink, just stared into it like she might find words floating there. "I know you're upset about the move." Emily's voice came out smaller than usual, almost apologetic. Claire opened her mouth, then closed it. She'd practiced this, lying awake at 3 in the morning, rehearsing all the ways she could be supportive and modern and understanding. But what came out wasn't any of those careful speeches. "I'm terrified." The words surprised even her. "That you'll be so far away, and I won't know if you're okay. That I won't be there when you need me. That you'll forget." She stopped, the last words catching in her throat. "Forget what?" Emily looked up, her eyes shining. "That this is home." Claire gestured around the kitchen, at the dent in the wall from when Emily had thrown her backpack too hard in 7th grade, at the growth chart penciled on the doorframe, at the refrigerator covered in photos and takeout menus, and Emily's old crayon drawings that Claire had never been able to throw away. "That I'm here." Emily set down her coffee and reached across the table, covering Claire's hand with her own. "Mom, I could never forget. That's actually why I wanted to talk to you." She took a breath. "I want to take some things with me. Things that feel like home. Like you." Claire blinked, surprised by the sudden heat behind her eyes. "And I was thinking," Emily glanced toward the counter, "about Grandma's recipe box." The words hung in the air between them. Claire followed her daughter's gaze to the pale blue box, sitting there, like it had been waiting for this moment all along. "Your grandmother's box," Claire heard her voice go soft. "I remember her teaching me to make those snickerdoodles." Emily smiled, though her eyes were damp now too. How she'd let me crack the eggs, even though I got shell everywhere. How she'd write out the recipes on those index cards in her perfect cursive, and she'd always add little notes. "Extra vanilla for special occasions. Don't overmix, or they'll be tough." Made this the day Emily was born. Claire felt something crack open in her chest. She rose from the table and crossed to the counter, lifting the recipe box with both hands. It was heavier than she remembered, dense with years and memory and love, measured out in cups and teaspoons. She carried it back to the table and set it between them. The lid creaked as she lifted it, releasing the faint scent of cinnamon and vanilla that had somehow soaked into the wood itself. Inside, hundreds of index cards stood in neat rows, some typed, some handwritten, some stained with batter and sauce and thyme. Emily reached in and pulled one out at random. Chicken and dumplings. She turned it over, reading the notes on the back. Made this every Sunday after church. The girls loved it. Even when they were teenagers and too cool for everything else, they'd come home for Sunday dinner. The girls. That was Claire and her sister. She'd forgotten her mother used to call them that. They went through the cards slowly, reading the recipes aloud like prayers. Pot roast, lemon bars, the chocolate cake Claire had requested every birthday until she was 20. Emily's favorite banana bread, made every Saturday morning for years. Each card told a story. Each stain was a memory pressed flat and preserved. Look at this one. Emily held up a card covered in her grandmother's handwriting, the ink slightly smudged. Apple pie, traditional, and underneath, in different ink, a note added later. Made this, with Claire, for her first Thanksgiving hosting. She burned the crust, but we ate it anyway. Made this with Emily for her 10th birthday. She insisted on making the lattice top herself. It was crooked and perfect. Claire's throat went tight. She hadn't known her mother had kept adding to these cards, documenting each time the recipes got passed down, noting who had helped and what had gone wrong and right. There are so many. Emily's voice wavered. How do I choose which ones to take? Claire looked at her daughter, at this woman she'd raised, who was brave enough to build a life 3,000 miles away, who wanted to carry home with her in the only way that mattered. Not in photographs or furniture, but in the things they made together, the rituals that connected them across distance and time. You take the whole box. Claire heard herself offering it before she'd fully decided, but as soon as the words were out, she knew they were right. Mom, I can't. These are yours. This is all you have left of Grandma. Claire shook her head. This isn't what I have left of your grandmother. I have her in every time I make her pot roast without looking at the recipe. I have her in the way I crack eggs on the side of the bowl, the way I always taste the batter, the way I can't throw away leftovers without putting them in the good containers. She reached across and tucked a strand of hair behind Emily's ear, the way she'd been doing since Emily was small enough to sit in her lap. And I have her in you, in the way you insisted on making that crooked lattice top, in the way you always add extra vanilla, in the way you're about to carry these recipes across the country and make them in your own kitchen. But what will you use? Emily's cheeks were wet now, not even trying to hide it. Claire pulled out her phone and held it up. You're going to photograph every single card before you go. And then you're going to call me the first time you make one in Portland, and we're going to stay on video chat the whole time. And you're going to tell me if you added extra garlic or used butter instead of oil. And every time you make one of these, you're going to remember that I'm here, that this is home. And that home isn't a place you leave behind. It's something you carry with you and build again wherever you go. Emily stood up and came around the table, wrapping her arms around Claire's shoulders, pressing her face against her mother's neck the way she used to when she was little and scared of thunderstorms. Claire held her tight, breathing in the scent of her daughter's shampoo, memorizing the weight of her, the warmth. They stayed like that for a long time, the afternoon light shifting across the kitchen floor, the coffee going cold in their mugs. Eventually, Emily pulled back, wiping her eyes and laughing a little. Okay, she sniffled, but I'm making copies of everything first, and I'm adding my own notes, the way Grandma did. So when I have kids someday, they'll know the whole story. Claire felt her heart expand impossibly, making room for futures she hadn't let herself imagine yet. Grandchildren who would learn these recipes. Emily's kitchen in Portland, filled with the smell of her grandmother's chocolate cake. The three of them connected across years and miles by flour and sugar and the careful notation of what made each dish special. You know what we should do right now? Claire stood up, feeling suddenly light, suddenly certain. We should make those snickerdoodles, the ones your grandma taught you. And we're going to photograph every step, and you're going to write it all down on a new card. The whole story. Made this the day before I moved to Portland with my mom, even though we were both crying into the batter. Emily laughed and cried at the same time, nodding. Extra cinnamon. Extra cinnamon, Claire agreed. They pulled out the ingredients together, moving around each other in the familiar dance of the kitchen, reading the recipe aloud, arguing gently about oven temperature and whether the dough needed to chill longer. Emily got eggshell in the batter, and they both laughed. Claire let her daughter measure the cinnamon sugar mixture, watching her careful movements, the way she pursed her lips in concentration, just like her grandmother used to do. The kitchen filled with the warm spice of cinnamon, with laughter and tears, and the easy silence of two people who knew each other's rhythms. While the cookies baked, Emily wrote on a fresh index card in her own imperfect handwriting, adding to the story that would outlive them all. When the timer chimed, they pulled the tray from the oven and stood side by side, looking down at the imperfect circles, some edges burned, some centers still soft, all of them exactly right. They're crooked and perfect, Claire whispered, echoing her mother's words from years ago. Emily slipped her hand into her mother's and squeezed, just like us. And in that moment, Claire understood what her mother had known all along. That love isn't about holding on tight enough to keep people from leaving. It's about giving them something to carry with them, something that will remind them where they come from and who they are. It's about trust that the recipes will hold, that the stories will continue, that the connections forged in warm kitchens over shared work and laughter are stronger than any distance. The evening light turned golden through the window. The recipe box sat on the table between them, waiting to begin its next chapter. And in the quiet space of that kitchen, with the smell of cinnamon in the air and their hands sticky with sugar, Claire felt her mother's presence as clearly as if she were standing right there beside them, smiling at the mess they'd made, at the love they were learning to carry forward in the only way that mattered. Everything was going to be just fine.